Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Seven, live from Jerusalem with Rabbi Aaron David Poston. This class has been such a joy. He's transitioned to the 48 ways to wisdom, and it's been profound so far. I encourage everybody to go back and check out each and every message. We're starting today with part 14. It's going to be exciting. I'm sure I enjoyed last week. So let's just jump right in and see how the rabbi's doing, and let's listen in to what the next path to wisdom is. Rabbi Poston, so good to be with you, sir. I know it's late in Jerusalem, and we in the rest of the world are so appreciative that you're taking the time to share this wonderful series with us.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure, Dan, and welcome everybody, all the people who are watching us right now, live, and those who are watching afterwards from the recording. We're going to have a very special class. This is number 14 of the 48 ways. I think it's fundamental for every Ben Noach. First of all, every Jew should know this, but this one in particular, I think is, okay, look, somebody wants wisdom, they need all 48 ways. But if they're looking for the ultimate wisdom, this is going to be key. It's going to be so fundamental in your search for wisdom, for what we call the truth, the ultimate truth. You won't go wrong. You're not going to go wrong here. I just want to finish one thing. I was just doing something else, and I have to give you my total focus. I just want to mention that tonight is 1 week before Purim, so this is Motzi Shabbos, February 20th. I know you just had Rabbi Kaufman on. He does not live in Jerusalem, so next Saturday night for him is not Purim at all. It's a very awkward thing, so people should become a little bit familiar with the idea that a city that was walled, that had walls from the time of Yeshua, Joshua ben Nun, would celebrate Purim on the 15th. Everyone else in the world, except, like I said, for cities that were walled from the time of Joshua, would celebrate, otherwise they would celebrate on the 14th. So only, like Jerusalem, there are a few other ancient towns that have doubts, and they might celebrate on both days, the 14th and the 15th. So what happened when Shabbat, right? The rabbis decreed we're not going to, well, first of all, the whole idea is rabbinic anyway, so they had every right to make up any rules they wanted. So one of the rules is we don't read the Megillah on Shabbat because someone might take it outside, carry it within a public thoroughfare, and that would be a big no-no, as you guys already are aware of. So they divided it up. We're going to read in Jerusalem like everyone else. So comes Thursday night, Friday, we're going to read the Megillah. Shabbat day is actually Purim. So we're not going to celebrate with foodstuffs. We're not going to have our Suda. That's going to be pushed off till Sunday. And there's other mitzvahs also, giving money to the poor and giving gift baskets, food to people. So that's going to be pushed off till Sunday, although there are strict opinions to also, I say strict, but let's say, I'm going to use the Hebrew word, machmir, to be a little bit more, I don't know if you want to call it from or religious, but to be a little bit more strict and also do these things on Friday. And, I'm talking about the meal, increase your meal on Friday, as well as give gifts to the poor on Friday. But the main mitzvah would be on Sunday. So basically, when it comes to our prayers, we recognize, like in the prayers and in the Torah reading on Shabbat, it is Purim. So we will continue to do all the things when it comes to prayer and the activities in the Beit Knesset, in the shul, in the synagogue on Saturday. So it's called Purim Meshulash. Meshulash means divided into threes. So it's not one day, it's a 3-day celebration for us in Jerusalem. Now, one of the gifts in Israel, as most of your watchers, subscribers probably know, that during the exile, most of the holidays, I mean, Yom Kippur is an exception. Rosh Hashanah is also, there's a reason why it's 2 days, but let's just say that you have Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. We actually celebrate 2 days of holiday outside of, let's say, while we're in exile. And it's only in Israel itself that we celebrate 1 day. Why am I bringing this up? Oh my God. I just had a little bit of a flash. I don't exactly remember why I was bringing this up. I think, I wanted to say like this, that it's kind of like a blessing and a curse, right? So when you're outside the land, okay, I'm not going to say it's a curse, but, for people to celebrate, celebration is one thing. It should be a good thing. But, it's a little bit of a tircha. It's a little bit of a pain, knowing you're in exile and you have to keep these days 2 days in a row. Okay, no cooking. You have to have, you can cook on Yontif, but most people don't. No cleaning, no showering. There's certain things a little bit.
You got to prepare for it. Yeah.
I know that you're supposed to be happy on the holidays, but to have 2 days straight. Now, in Israel, we only keep 1 day. Now, it's like reverse when it comes to Purim, because even though it's just Jerusalem, many people come from all over the country to Jerusalem to celebrate Purim the following day. Or like for me, when I was younger, I used to leave Jerusalem the day before, let's say Bnei Brak or Beitar, some other place, and I could celebrate Purim 2 days in Eretz Yisrael. Purim is very simchadik. It's a very happy holiday. And of course, you can shower, you can cook, you can do all that stuff. So I don't mean chas v'shalom, God forbid, that it's a curse in a sense, but there is this, it's a heavy load. And people should leave exile. It's one of my little messages. It's a little bit of a perk, a plug. Come here, celebrate 1 day like the rest of us in Eretz Yisrael. And when it comes to Purim, you get to celebrate 2 days, right? But again, not that it's a 2-day celebration. It's outside of Jerusalem, it's 1 day, the 14th. And inside Jerusalem, it's the 15th. But it's only a hop, skip, and a jump. The country is a very small country. It's very easy to go on a bus or take a car and celebrate with family and friends anywhere in the country. Okay, I didn't mean it was a curse to keep 2 days, but I think those who do keep 2 days, I think they understand what I mean. Not the word curse, but I mean a tircha of a sort. Okay, now there's another, just a metaphysical thing, that is they need that booster for 2 days, because they're so far away from the holiness and the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael that it does them a lot of good to keep these 2 days for the Hagim, for these holidays. And you can tell that it's a real booster shot when it comes to Purim. You know what I'm talking about. 2 days of Purim is just like unbelievable. Okay, with that having been said, what else did I want to say about that? I think I covered that. All right. So number 14 of the 48 ways is called mikra. Mikra, it's talking about the written Torah, right? That's what it literally means. However, I shouldn't say literally. I mean, that's how it's translated. But what it literally means is to read. I mentioned before that in terms of, it's not just a Jewish religion. It's not a religion. It's a whole way of life that we are taught from an early age how to read. We have to, right? The father has an obligation to teach his children, of course, the Shema, how to read the Siddur or the prayers, going up to the Torah. Today, if I get called up to the Torah, there's someone else that reads for me. But throughout Jewish history, it's always been the person who gets, pretty much, except for the last few hundred years, the person who gets called up to the in Shabbat, there's 7 different people being called up. Each one knows the whole Torah, and he goes up. There's no vowels. You have to be able to read it correctly with as well. There's also what we call a trup. It's a cantillations, musical cantillations, when to raise your voice, I'm not good at it, so I'm not even going to try. But obviously the comments and the periods are the most important part. That I can do. Right, I can get up there and read. I know where to stop. I know where to raise my voice, but I'm not. I tried out for the Glee Club when I was in middle school or grade school. You know what they told me? Don't come back. They said, don't even try. Don't waste your time. Anyway,
I know the feeling, Rabbi.
So the Rosh Hashiva of Noach Weinberg. Again, I'll just stress one more time. People should buy this book. Right, he's the one who made this idea of the 48 ways very popular, right? But I mentioned to you, it's already in Mishnah and Pirkei Avot. It's ancient wisdom. In fact, we already were aware of these ideas from the time we left Egypt until we received the Torah at Sinai. These are the 48 ways in order to receive the Torah that we had to work on our character. So the Rav Noach always called this, he called the Torah written instructions for living. And he would give a mashal, he would give an analogy, and I like it. So it's not brought in the book, but this analogy I remember clearly. He said, imagine in the 1960s, it could have been the late 50s or late 60s, I don't know exactly when the computers first came out, I think they were like the size of a room. They weren't like the size of a cell phone, okay? They were like the size of a room or an elevator. So let's just say the first time there was something compact, right? You can order from China and it arrived. You open up the box. I guess they didn't have Amazon back then, but whatever it was, the box came, you ordered it from China, and you open it up, and there's no instruction manual. Now, we take for granted, I think, I do anyway, because I meet people that don't know how to cut and paste. But imagine, you could pretty much figure out how to turn it on, maybe even how to plug it in. But some of the most basic, and I'm calling them basic. Maybe they're not basic for some people, but I think every person born in the last 30 years, it's basic. Enter, cut and paste. It's pretty. So just imagine
pre-DOS. Yeah, pre-DOS.
What would it take you to figure out instead of rewriting? I mean, there are people that do this. They don't know there's a thing called cut and paste, and they would rewrite. I mean, I'm sorry to say, I know some people that still to this day would do it, and you have to teach them. Okay, so cut and paste is pretty basic, elementary. But there's so many other functions. I mean, if you use Excel, I mean, I'm not like a big bucky, but Excel is a little bit more advanced than regular Word, right? So anyway, I also use so many other apps, and you just have to have at least some tutorial, some beginning. So imagine if you got this computer and you didn't have, how many years of just trial and error would it take you to figure things out? I don't know. I mean, if it's even a week or a day, that's too long. So here we have our whole life, 120 years. What are we waiting for? This is the Torah is the instruction manual for living. And he wanted to really, just stress this over and over again. Now, another, I'm going to say an analogy, but it's really in the Torah itself. God said you can eat from every tree of the garden, correct? Except for one. Now, later on, when he kicks Adam out of the garden, he puts these guards, these angels, these guards, and he says, what does he say? Lest Adam come back and eat from the tree of life and live forever. What does it tell you? So the Rosh Shiva explains that he's not the only one. We're talking about this is ancient wisdom already, but he brings it down so we can understand it. That had we eaten from the tree of life first, before eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, then there would never have been a punishment of death. So what is the tree of life? The tree of life is Torah. And the tree of knowledge of good and evil is experience. So what's the point? Going through life without having the tree of life is just going through experience. And that is, as we all know, does not have such a good ending. Right? The consequences are severe because you don't know what you're doing. It's like the blind leading the blind. Now here you have the Torah, the tree of life. That's what the Torah is, the tree of life. So this is what mikra is all about. You have to see the Torah as instructions for living. But the problem is most people don't know Hebrew, which is a big problem because every translation is someone else's interpretation. I'll go so far. He actually says, this is his words, it's a lie. It's a lie. It's not your truth. It might be someone else's truth, but it's not your truth. So it's a lie. So he encourages you. You must not only learn Hebrew, but you're going to see through this session that you have to have also somebody who's able to tell you what it says, because even though you can read, you learned how to read because someone taught you that an aleph is an aleph, a bet is a bet in translation, an A is an A B is a B, right? And what the word means and how to pronounce it, and what the, when I learn with my students and we come across a new word, I tell them you have to have a dictionary as your best friend. You will see minimally, that every word you come across has about 8 possible definitions. And you're going to have to learn the whole context, of course, with your teacher, and then you'll be able to plug in. But just keep in mind that every one of those 8 definitions are all interrelated, and they're all true on some level, which is the most amazing thing. So this requires a lot of diligence, a lot of practice and experience. So that's why our own Mishnah tells us that a child, the first thing he should learn is mikra. Mikra meaning Tanakh. So I'm going to explain what Tanakh is in a second. I know most people watching know it, right? But you start with what we call the Tanakh at age 5. Talk about literacy. The literacy rate of the Jewish people for 99% of history has been 99% literate. Whereas, unfortunately, I mean, this is proven. I'm not coming off with, off the hip, as they say, off the cuff. But 99% of world history actually is 99% illiterate. I mean, you can just really, you have to go through history. There's so many, besides
100 years ago, 200 years ago,
history channels, and I watch. I have to say, a considerable amount of history, and the wars, the culture, the despots, the tyrants,
mindless.
Talk about what the Jews have given to mankind in terms of civility, in terms of civilization, in terms of law, is invaluable. Okay, and we're going to talk about it tonight, and it's all because of mikra. It's all because of the ability to read the instructions, living, and to hopefully live by them. So the first thing the Rosh Yeshiva mentions in the book, as I mentioned, this is all the Rosh Yeshiva's words, but it was put together by students of his. The first thing you have to understand what mikra is Torah shebechtav. Bechtav means written. It's the written word. And it's divided as the word Tanakh means Torah. That's the 5 books of Moses. Nevi'im, that's the prophets. That starts with an N or a Nun. And a Kaf, which is Ksuvim, the writings. So just know what they are, right? The Torah part is the 5 books of Moses. And that was revealed to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. Now, what are the prophets? There are different types of prophets throughout history. We had seers and visionaries, people who gave rebuke. The main job was not to foretell the future. That wasn't their main job. In fact, to verify that a prophet who came to rebuke was the real deal, so he was challenged to speak about things that would happen in the future. Now, I asked my audience many times, my students, I should say, if a prophet said something that didn't come about, is that considered a false prophet? And many uninitiated, non-thinking people come back and say, of course, it has to be he's a false prophet. If he prophesied something that didn't come about, of course, the Torah even says, kill him. But that's not true, right? It's not true. And let me explain why. I've explained this before, but I'm going to explain it again. One way to verify if he's a true prophet is only if he speaks about something in a positive way. Now, I don't know what's considered positive in these days, but let's say, the stock market is going to go up, or, the Mets are going to win. I don't even know who they play anymore, but let's just say, something positive, right? That's going to happen. So if it doesn't happen, he is a false prophet for sure. But if he says something negative, remember his main goal is to rebuke the people, to teach them. And therefore, like we know from Nineveh, that if tshuva, which God himself said in the prophecy, I have seen their deeds, I've seen their heart, I've seen them change their ways. And therefore, even Yonah, who said something bad was going to happen, it didn't happen. Yonah's not a false prophet. Yonah's an effective prophet. An effective prophet, not a false prophet. Okay, so the ones that are written in the Nevi'im happen to be, now we had millions of prophets. The number is varying. The Gemara seems to mention there were 1 million prophets, or 1,000,002. I'm under the impression from other writings there were at least 6 million they all had the ability to raise the dead. It's like no big chidush. It was not anything novel that one man 2,000 years ago, stories are written about somebody who raised the dead, therefore he must be God incarnate. The whole thing is like, I don't even want to say this is like a family show, right? Nonsense. But so basically those 48 prophets that got into the Tanakh, who were called prophets, their prophecies were deemed relevant for all time. That's the main point. Okay, so every prophet, if you were sick, if someone was not well physically, they wouldn't go to a doctor. Now, things are obviously different today. We don't have prophecy. But they wouldn't go to a doctor necessarily. They would go to the prophet to find out what sin they were doing, to find out what exactly they needed to do to rectify their sin, and they were basically healed. Okay, so that was a major difference. Okay, another thing is ksuvim, the writings. The writings are not prophecy. Now, there are certain, as we'll know, Daniel, for example, King David, right? They had Ruach HaKodesh. They had Holy Spirit. Now, there's different levels of prophecy. So it doesn't mean that they themselves experience different levels of prophecy in their lifetime, but these writings are not prophetic in and of themselves.
Right.
They are with Ruach HaKodesh. Now, we all know that I think it's still true to this day. Maybe it's even more true because of the internet, but that the Tanakh, and it's obviously translated to almost every language, probably every language in the world, is a world time all bestseller, right? I mean, we're talking about through history. So once even before the printing press, at least handwritten manuscripts, if someone was going to hire somebody to write a manuscript, that probably would have been the book at the time. Of course, when the printing press came out, the Christians, right, they helped disseminate the Bible greatly. But even today, I'm sure that through the internet, I'm not sure, I'm just guessing that still
by a long shot.
We would ask Google, maybe because there's a lot of competition with pornography. I have no idea. I know that they say that pornography is probably one of the highest sought out things on the internet, but at least in terms of real literature, real books, the Tanakh is probably way up there. So obviously for what we call Western civilization, even at least in Islam also, the Torah obviously has the foundation for that. For those who are from America, I think everybody's aware of what it says about all men having inalienable rights, right? This is such a fundamental concept for the Western civilization. Concepts such as love your neighbors yourself. By the way, it's written in the Torah. You didn't have to have some false prophet any other time coming later and saying such a thing. There's Isaiah's wall in New York, and I'm not a big fan of the United Nations, but nevertheless, Isaiah was a Jewish prophet, and his words, right, of one day, soon, Bezrat Hashem, right, we'll take all those weapons of war and, melt them down and make them into utensils for producing more food, right? That's the idea. And that basically, I'm from Philadelphia, so there's a Liberty Bell. And inscribed, it says Leviticus, I forget which chapter right now, but it says proclaim liberty throughout the land. This is part of the Torah, right? And everyone should go free, right? At the end of the sabbatical year, number one, but this particular line is from the Jubilee. Okay, so that's a great, this is all in the mikra, right? This is how important the Torah itself is, right? I'm going to quote John Adams. John Adams, if you don't know who he was the second president of the United States. And I'll read what he says. Now, he's not the only one. We have quotes. I'm not going to spend my time doing this, but who wrote Huckleberry Finn? What was the guy's name?
The one who came to Israel in the 1800s?
Twain, yeah, Mark Twain, 200 years, 50 years ago. Okay, so we're not going to quote all of it. I just want John Adams to be heard. He said, I will insist the Hebrews have contributed more to civilized men than any other nation. If I was an atheist and I believed in blind eternal fate, I should still believe that fate had ordained the Jews to be the most essential instrument for civilizing the nations. And then he continues, they are the most glamorous nation that ever inhabited this earth. The Romans and their empire were but a bubble in comparison to the Jews. They have given religion to 3/4 of the globe and influenced the affairs of mankind more and more happily than any other nation, ancient or modern. Okay, so we see the Jews obviously are, the original disseminators of this, we'll call the manual for living. And it's the owner's manual. I mean, we're here on the planet. It is the owner's manual. Even when you think about many Noahides, I should say many Noahides, but there are some really earthy, crunchy Jews who aren't so religious, but they believe that, listen, when it comes to Parshas Noach, it's giving us responsibility to care for the world, whether it's for animals, the environment, or whatever. Ultimately, the truth is it's about morals, right? If we really hold them by morality, that is actually going to save the world more than some of these environmental issues. But nevertheless, it is true. It is true that we're responsible as best as we can to take care of this planet that we're on. So basically, one should spend as much time to try to understand. I'm just pushing mikra, right? Mikra means the actual text. Okay, so here's a really crazy idea. So he speaks about I think this rover just landed on Mars again. I don't know if it's the first, second, third. I don't know how many times we've sent probes into outer space looking for life. But imagine if we got a text in alien language. How many professors, how much money, right? How much Biden would he put any money into? I have no idea. But let's just say every world leader would be severely interested, extremely interested in trying to find out what this message contained. Well, guess what? We got it, right? It's not an alien text. This comes from God himself. And here's the most amazing statement that I'm going to make tonight. I don't know if it's going to be the most amazing, but it's truly amazing. So we have a tradition. It says God looked into the Torah and created the world. Okay, is it easy to understand? I mean, you have many questions could be asked. Why would he need to look into the Torah? Where did the Torah come from? Isn't it his writing? He doesn't forget. I mean, what does it mean? So I want to spend a little bit of time after I go through some of the other sources, and we'll go back into many other sources. But just keep this in mind. I mean, this is the blueprint of creation. I want to explain what it means. Maybe I should do that now. There's too much to say about it, so I want to save it for the end. But I'll give you a little idea. So like a regular architect, so he'll look at blueprints and create something. Now, he may or may not have created those blueprints, but at least he can look at those blueprints, right? I mean, obviously there are architects that make blueprints, and there's architects that read blueprints. So it's not necessarily the same person. So here we're talking about, as I mentioned, God is the architect, and yet how is it that he needed to look into the Torah? What does that tell us? So from my simple understanding, and we're going to go much deeper than that, is that the Torah, which is the word, right? That's what mikra, it's reading the word, is his own thoughts. And that is like crazy. right? That's better than any drug. If you could meld, I mean, really mesh your mind with God's thoughts, that's the best drug you can ever have or imagine taking. And that's coming from me. Okay. So obviously, this Torah contains all the secrets of the universe. But we have to learn how to ask the right questions. Now, there's a verse in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 47. So it's only the first few words I want to mention, but let's hear it.
Deuteronomy 32, verse 7.
Yeah, 47.
47 reads, "For it is not an empty thing for you, for it is your life, and through this thing you will lengthen your days upon the land to which you are crossing over to the Jordan to possess it."
Now, as I mentioned, it's just the first few words. When it says, "For it is not an empty thing," if you can read from the context, we're talking about the Torah the whole time. For it is your life. Ki lo davar raku michem. For this is not either a thing or even a word, a davar. Right? It's not an empty thing. That is michem. Now, the word michem means for you or from you. So Rashi says, well, let me explain. That the word michem, and let me say what the Rosh Yeshiva says. It's not an empty thing for you. So the rabbis say, if the Torah seems empty, is the word, right? It's not an empty thing. If it seems empty, it's because it's from you that it's empty. Not that the Torah itself is empty, but that you are missing the point. If something doesn't seem to make sense, don't dismiss it as irrelevant. Keep asking, searching, delving deeper into every piece of whatever the Torah is trying to tell you. Remember, it's an instruction manual for living. It's written by God himself. Every little detail is an expression of his will. We're talking about, I don't know if I want to use this terminology, but I'll use it. Every, I don't know, what do they call it? Dot and tittle or whatever. There's this, like, in other words, every crossing of jot and tittle. Right? Every crossing of a T, every dot on an I, right? We're talking about crowns on each of the letters. We're talking about, obviously, the vowels, whether it's written grammatically correct or written as an anomaly, not grammatically correct. Why? Why? God, who's the greatest, I don't know if the word is grammarian, he invented the language. He knows grammar better than anyone else, and yet he wrote or had us write the word wrong, meaning not wrong, but it's not pronounced that way, or you would never use that word in this context with that vowelization. Mm-hmm. And yet, throughout the Torah, you have plenty of that. And every single one of those is a lesson for life, because he didn't do it, it's not an accident.
You've been quite clear with me on that, Rabbi. I thank you for that.
I'm going to give a few examples tonight. We're going to go into a little bit. Here's another example of how important, right? How important it is. You have Abraham sitting there and speaking to God. It's the day, right? He had his bris milah and he's recovering. And it's actually the third day after his brit milah, and he's recovering, and he sees at a distance, and he's sitting at the opening of his tent, and it's a very hot day. He's eager to have guests. This is who Avram is. This is his personality. And what does he say? Excuse me, God, I have to take care of these people. Now, I don't care who you are. If you're even an atheist, right? You have an opportunity to talk to God. If there is a God for an atheist, why would you say, excuse me, I have something else to take care of. This seems to be more important than talking to you. Hello, this is going to translate into the most important, I'll call it religious concept. When we're talking about religion, I don't like the word religion because Judaism is not a religion, certainly not man-made. It's much more. But why would you think that it's more important? Abraham was the founder of this religion, stop speaking to God in order to take care of these strangers. He's in the midst of a prophetic experience with the master of the universe. And he just says, pardon me, God, I got to take care of some guests. So the Talmud derives a profound lesson from this incident. It's greater to be hospitable to guests than to speak to God directly. Why is that? I'll tell you why. Because as great as talking to God is, being like God is greater. Now, I'm not talking about, like, obviously, if you have a crackpot idea of what God is, you're right. But to be like the true God who wrote this manual and tells you how to, it's explaining to you how to be like God, how to be godly. Okay, what does it mean to be like God? So, truth be told, and we've spoken about this before, and the Rosh Yeshiva was great at trying to get this message across. God created us as pleasure beings, beings that are desiring comfort and pleasure, right? Pleasure. He created the world for our pleasure. Everything he created, whether it's fruit, hands, love, they're all manifestations of his kindness. The world is one big country club, one big hospitality inn. Therefore, when you assume the role of host, serving your fellow man, you're acting like God. Avram was wealthy and famous, yet it was not at all beneath him to serve strangers. He understood this lesson well, obviously. Okay. If you study the Torah, you'll find all kinds of gems, all kinds. And now he stresses the importance of learning Hebrew. Now is where, even as a searcher, I always wanted to go to the source. I'm not going to spend this time going through all the different religions that I actually sought out before I found Judaism. I mean, I was born a Jew, but I wasn't born in the most religious home. I knew my great-grandparents were Orthodox and kept Shabbos. Not that I really knew them. I visited them, and I had great respect for them, but they died while I was young. I knew of stories of my own parents. They told me that their parents would find nickels on the counter on Shabbos afternoon, so they go to the movie theater. So, in other words, their parents kept Shabbos, but they didn't think it was that important for the younger generation.
Really?
Well, unfortunately, we lost it. Why did I bring that up? Because when I was on my own search, I always just forget about the fact that my great-grandparents were very religious. Just that, I'll tell you what I thought. I said, why is the world so messed up? It must be because of the Vietnam War, right? That's what it is. Well, what caused the Vietnam War? Maybe it was the Korean War never really finished. Well, what caused the Korean War? Well, maybe it was, the Cold War. They never really finished World War II. There was these, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the excesses, from whatever's left over from the war was never fully resolved. Well, what caused World War II? Must be the excesses of World War I. It was never fully finished. And go back and back and back. It's like, I give up already. I mean, where's the, I didn't really give up, but I'm saying, like, it must be going back. And when I was fishing around, or let's say fondling Christianity and Eastern Christianity, the Essenes and the Gnosticism and all that, thinking, well, everyone's claiming that the Jews were the original, the original receivers of the Torah,
sure,
whether it was Christianity or Islam or any other religion. And they all wanted what the Jews are. They all are claiming that they're now the chosen people. So why don't I find out what it means to be the chosen people? And, okay, long story short. We did discuss this, I think it was last week or the week before, about a theory. It started somewhere in Germany, maybe 150, 200 years ago, where they saw and noticed, well, if the Torah itself uses different names for God, it must be that there were different authors, right? They had the J the Yud Hey Vav Hey name. There was a certain group that wrote those verses or passages or paragraphs. You have the
documentary hypothesis. Yeah.
Yeah. You have the P, the priestly, most of Leviticus. You have the D for Deuteronomy. If you only read the Hebrew, you would understand, right? Obviously, if you're looking at a German translation, English translation, whatever, you're not going to come to this, but you understand. So he mentions this. He says, for example, the Torah uses 7 primary names to describe God. Each name refers to a unique aspect of God's essence, all-knowing, all-powerful, prime mover, merciful. But in English, these names are all translated the same way. And as a result, much of the depth is lost. And he gives an example. The word chet we use for sin. So if you use the word sin in English, especially after, I'm going to use the word anyway. I'm going to say bastardized by the Christians, right? I can use that. It works. Works.
We're on social media. It's not on television.
I know. So you have this word sin, which implies when the Christians get a hold of it, that it's eternal damnation, that there's no return, right? It's irredeemably evil, and that's not at all what it means. Like Boker Tov Eliyahu, good morning, Elijah. Hello, it means missed the mark, made a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes, and you're going to tell me that's irredeemable evil? I mean, I don't want any part of that religion. Thank God. Okay, Beseder. So I'm just letting you know, like when you look at the Hebrew with clear eyes, without a veil, you'll come to a whole different understanding. Beautiful. Basically, it's the Torah view that human beings are essentially good, right? We're not evil, right? I mean, there's other religions. They believe you're born in sin. You're born evil. Yes, we agree that there's a Yetzer Hara and it's stronger when you're young. But Baruch Hashem, you grow up and you get a Yetzer Hara.
Yeah.
So you get an intellect and you have free choice. And the truth is everything balances out. You're not truly evil. Okay? So basically human beings are essentially good. We all make mistakes. We lose our way. And at times we miss the target. But our soul, our real essence, really wants to do good. And tshuva, which really means to return, repentance. It means to return. And it describes a process of recalibrating our focus and getting back on track. So that's what you need to know. And now he mentions that the time is right now. What do you mean now? Unfortunately, right, people will say, it's too late in life, or I'm too busy making a living, whatever it is. There is a Pirkei Avot that I want to quote. It's interesting. Where is it? Let me stick to this 1 second. Where is it? Okay, it's Pirkei Avot, chapter 2, Mishnah 4. I can't find it here. But okay.
Yeah,
you want me to read it? Find it? Yeah, I just copied it over. All right. If I'm not mistaken, it's towards the end, but I thought I had it on my source sheet, but I don't.
Do you want me to look it up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to look again. Oh, I did find it. Okay, it's the very end. The Hillel said, and I don't want to repeat everything he said. I just want to go to the end. Do not say, when I free myself of my concerns, I will study. For perhaps you will never free yourself. So in Hebrew it says, the al tomar, the kishap efna eshna. Don't say that when I finally have free time, I will study. Shema lo tifane. Maybe you won't have that free time. I mean, it makes a lot of sense what he's saying. So basically, right now is the time. It should be an absolute priority, right? If you were, like we said, you're on a search, you're one of these major professors or scientists that received this message, and everyone's trying to decipher it. Well, it's there. Make time. And now it's true, your academic education might have ended years ago, but when it comes to Torah learning, there's no such thing as, beyond that. You can never finish. Okay? In fact, I'll just mention that every Jew is supposed to read through it. There's mikra, shnai mikra v'targum, to read twice in Hebrew, the actual Torah portion each week, and a third time I'll just use Aramaic as an example. That's what it was in past, but many explain that any language you understand. So in other words, even if you don't understand it, twice in Hebrew, a third time in a language you understand, and of course, a fourth time when you go to synagogue and hear it being read publicly another time. So really, it's 4 times a week. We spoke about the importance of reviewing 4 times anyway before. Anyway, just in terms of simanim, Rosh Hashiva Rav Noach Weinberg was big on simanim. What do I mean by simanim? Simanim means like a system. Simanim actually means signs, but in this context, like if I have a paragraph, so I would put a word on top of that paragraph that word would help me remember what the paragraph encapsulates.
Right.
Contained. So if I put, as my friend Rabbi Gedalia Garfein would do, on every daf of the Gemara, right? There's over 7,000 pages. Write a word that would somehow summarize as many as one word, maybe 2 words, that would summarize and memorize that. So there are 669 paragraphs in the 5 books of Moses. So Aryeh Kaplan has a book called The Living Torah, and he actually has like less than a sentence, just a few words. Each paragraph is labeled, and that's a good way to start. Take his example, every paragraph, and I say paragraph, in other words, there's 54 portions, but every time there's a space, it's considered a paragraph. And you could remember, of course you can remember 669, especially you're talking about your whole lifetime, reviewing them all the time. You have a good idea of what's in each paragraph. The Shulchan Aruch, which many of these books behind me are, right? They're listed by number system, right? To remember what they call them paragraphs. Every paragraph is a numbered paragraph. And they have many halachos, many laws, but to sum it up into one idea. This is our life, right? It's our life. Again, you should never think you're too old to start. Rebbe Akiva, for those who are not familiar, apparently he was 40 years old when he began to learn, but he didn't just begin from nothing. He was minus. I mean, he hated the rabbis. He said, if I felt like, I don't know, a donkey or a mule that has a very strong bite. He felt like anytime I saw a rabbi, I would want to bite them. So he had such a negative attitude towards the rabbis, and yet he transformed himself at the age of 40, began to learn just the alphabet, right? The alphabet, and he eventually became one of the greatest sages with over 24,000 students.
Amazing.
Okay. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, chapter 5, Mishnah 26. The truth is, I think it's a different number according to the system. And I have here, I wrote down the correct number. I think it's 21 and 22. So I can read it if you want.
Well, I can pull it up if I can find it. I'm on chapter 5,
It's the last 2.
Starting at 21 reads, he used to say at 5 years of age, the study of scripture, at 10, the study of the Mishnah, at 13, subject to the commandments, at 15, the study of Talmud, at 18, the bridal canopy, at 20, for pursuit of livelihood, at 30, the peak of strength, At 40, wisdom. At 50, able to give counsel. At 60 years old, old age. At 70, fullness of years. At 80, the age of strength. Again, at 90, a bent body. At 100, as good as dead and gone, completely out of our world. And 22,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. The main point here, I wanted to mention that, this is Ben Bagbag said something, then Ben Hey said something. But he would say, I think it's Ben Hey, he says 5 years old, we begin studying scripture. This tells you a lot. This is 2,000 years old, written, is the Mishnah, going back even further. This was the most livchachil, this was the most preferred time. And to have a foundation, how do you build a house? We're talking about the Jews would then study Mishnah and Gemara, as you see, the age 10 and the age 15, goes on and on. You build your whole life. It is the structural foundation for building a life. And that is what I wanted to point out to you. This is what we call Torah's Chaim, the law of life. It doesn't just mean the law, it's the instructions for living. That is the best translation, and that's Rav Noach Weinberg's, one of his greatest contributions to explain to the world and explain to the Jewish people who are not aware, right? He was big into Kira, big into outreach. Okay, now I have here some interesting ideas. When I said originally, we're going into the sources, that God looked into the Torah and created the world. So I was fascinated. Even in Christian literature, they talk about the Word. The first thing was the Word. Well, that's what we're talking about, the Word, right? This is a Jewish idea, that God looked into the Torah and created the world. So the Zohar uses the very first verse, right? In the beginning, God's creation of the heavens and the earth. However you want to translate it, I don't care. It's a big lie. It doesn't matter. Go to the Hebrew. Bereshit, Bora Elokim et Shema V'Haaretz. What is the word Bereshit? The word Reshit is referring to the Torah. With Reshit, with the Torah, God created the heavens and the earth, right? It says he spoke. What did he speak? The very words that are written on the page. God spoke and the world came into being. He said, let there be light, and there was light, right? Of course, it's the word came before the world, but it didn't come before God. Okay, so keep that in mind. There's some great explanations all over the internet. There's too many to talk about, but there's one piece that I found quoted by Rabbi Tatz. Rabbi Akiva Tatz is one of my favorite rabbis. And so basically he wants to explain, if anybody doesn't know him, become familiar, Rabbi Akiva Tatz, A-K-I-V-A, first name, T-A-T-Z. He taught for Or Sameach for many years. I think he still teaches for Or Sameach in England. So he's very good. So what people fail to realize, they think, okay, the Torah must have been created by man. They see the way the world works. They see, let's say, shellfish. These are these creatures that walk on the bottom of the ocean and they eat garbage. And of course, it would be unhealthy to eat them. So we're looking at the world and we're creating a religion. What's the best way to survive this crazy world? He says, no, it's the other way around. The reason these foods are unhealthy is because they're prescribed by the Torah. Rather than shrimp being bad for you because they live at the bottom of the sea and so absorb all the elements which were deposited on the seabed, shrimps swim around in the schmutz. Schmutz, look it up in Google, S-H-M-U-T-Z. It is what it sounds like. It's because God in his Torah declared them spiritually impure. Like when Adam even named the different animals, he saw the essence of what they were. It wasn't that he developed what they were based on his name, but he was able to read what they were based on what Hashem made. So what does all this mean? According to this Kabbalistic wisdom, the book of the Zohar is telling us that the world is a copy of a Torah scroll. Can you imagine? Everywhere around you, you're looking. If you know halacha, if you know the scripture well, you're seeing God's essence. In other words, if he spoke, created the world, you're seeing letters. You see a lion, you're seeing the word Ari. You're seeing a hurricane, you're seeing a storm, you're seeing God's wisdom.
Out of the matrix, yeah.
The world is as it is because of what is written in the Torah. The deeper wisdom of the Zohar teaches us that if we want to really understand the world, we should study Torah and its commentaries. And that's, I'm going to leave you with that. There's Chabad has some very good, interesting things. I'm not so sure, but you can look it up. Is there anything here? I think I spoke about it. Although there's some proof texts. In other words, things that I spoke about already, being that, remember, God Bereshit, with Bereshit, which is the Torah, God created the world. Look in Proverbs 8:22.
Proverbs 8:22 reads, "The Lord acquired me at the beginning of his way, before his works of old."
Okay, so this is referring to, in Hebrew, it says Reshit. So God created me in the beginning, Reshit. So he created Reshit first, the first of his works of old. This is the Torah itself.
Amazing.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. I don't want to get mixed up here. Here we are. This is just something that I think everybody should know. If you don't know it, take it to heart. I know that we've discussed this idea in the beginning of our Beyond the Seven. Why does the Rambam sound so harsh when he says, and he's quoting earlier sources, but he says, if a non-Jew, I'm going to say even further, an akum, someone who is an idol worshiper, studies Torah, he's chayiv misa. He is worthy of being put to death. Not that any Jew would ever put someone to death for it, but that his life is not worth living. That's real. I think that's the best understanding. An idol worshiper who learns Torah, who's involved with learning Torah, his life is not worth living. So first of all, it does say idol worship. It doesn't say a ben Noach. Okay. But the idea in Hebrew, in Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 4, it says, before we read this, 7 laws of Noach, one of them is do not steal, correct? It's forbidden to steal. Now let's read chapter 33, verse 4.
Verse 33, or chapter 33, verse 4 says, "The Torah that Moses commanded us is a legacy for the congregation of Jacob."
Now in Hebrew, okay, you might not get the full understanding in English. Torah tziva lanu Moshe. The Torah was commanded to us by Moses, or the Torah that Moses commanded us, is a morasha. It's an inheritance. Inheritance now belongs to us. It was given to us, to Kehilat Yaakov. Now, it even goes further, because even though it says morasha, the shin and a samech actually interchangeable to a certain extent, and it could be read and understood. It's a morasa. It's an engagement. There's actually, so not only is a non-Jew who says, I own the Torah, I can read it the way I want and translate it the way I want, is called stealing. But it's also like adultery, because it is the engagement. It is a marriage between God and the Jewish people. Now, if someone recognizes that the Jews were the ones that received it and it belongs to them, and I as a guest want to learn and absorb the wisdom, gesund hate, all the power to you. It's that recognition that they are the true
well put, Rabbi.
Inheritors. They're the ones who it was given to, and they're the transmitters. I should listen to them not read it on my own, as I think that's really what the Rambam is saying, that if a non-Jew on his own is trying to learn the Torah, then his life is not worth living. He's just missed the entire boat, and he's going to walk away thinking he totally understands, and he doesn't even have a clue.
Puts them in the deeper darkness. Wouldn't that be a form of even idolatry for somebody to dare to do such in that wrong attitude? I see enough of them, and they come over to be B'nai Noach, and they, I had a dialogue with a new person this week, and of course they want to start making their own custom kippah, and they ask me questions, and so you do your best to try to give them healthy lessons for life, but we just don't know. But it's so funny to see that some of them just want to grab onto more than is actually allotted for them. I think this verse makes it so plain, Rabbi.
Okay, and just to focus in on Joshua chapter 1, verse 8.
1 second. Joshua chapter 1, verse 8. Oh, that's a well-known one, right? Oh. And of Levi, he said, your Tumim and Urim belong. Oh,
maybe no. I'm not reading. It's Joshua.
Oh, I'm in Deuteronomy. Sorry. I'm still in Deuteronomy. Why did it not change? Go. Oh, Joshua chapter 1, verse 8. Yes, this book of the Torah shall not leave your mouth. You shall meditate therein day and night, in order that you observe to do all that is written in it, for then will you succeed in all your ways, and then you will prosper.
Look, this is such a blessing, right? The book of the Torah, Lo Yamush Sefer Torah Zeh. Yamush means to be released or forgotten, like moved. So this Torah shall never be removed from your mouth. Now, if this doesn't, there's many verses we could use to show there's an oral Torah, but the mikra it means to read. It means to move your lips and to read it. So we're obviously talking about something that is physical, concrete, ink, black ink on white paper, right, on parchment. But it's something that is not just thought about. It's something we must profess. And that is the words. Now, that's just the words coming out of your mouth. Then it says you shall meditate on it day and night, 24 hours a day, in order, obviously, to do, but everything that's written in it. And then, of course, you'll have bracha. You'll have all kinds of success. The reason I'm bringing this up, I want to mention, for those who are watching this before Purim, so there's a verse in Exodus chapter 17, verse 14. This is forever, but it's relevant more now because it's the week.
Chapter 14, you said, Rabbi?
Chapter 17, verse 14.
Forgive me. 17, verse 14 reads, the Lord said to Moses, inscribe this as a memorial in the book and recite it into Joshua's ears, that I will surely obliterate the remembrance of Amalek from beneath the heavens.
Now, I'm just using this as a lesson because it's right before Purim. But I said, this idea shows you that if you don't know the Hebrew and you don't put extra effort into trying to study, and again, go to the Jewish sources, think about what it says. The Lord says to Moses, Ketov Zot, he tells him, write this as a zikaron. It's called a remembrance in a book. So that's what we're going to have. This is about Amalek coming. Read from verse 8 through 16. It's all about Amalek coming and the three people standing on the mountain, Moses in the middle. I gave a beautiful shir. I think it was a nice shir. Before Shabbat, before Parsha Zachor. So you can look at that. Inscribe this as a memorial in the book. So this is the Sefer Torah. This is the mikra. V'sim ba'azne Yehoshua, and place into his ears. What do you need to place into his ears? You just wrote in the book. Because there's something that is also oral. But it goes on. It says, I will surely obliterate the remembrance. I'm going to focus on these words. Ki moche emche. That word. I will surely obliterate the remembrance of Amalek. So the first thing we're taught, this is through, if I'm not mistaken, the Rokeach explains this. First, what we have is a remembrance, because in the order of words, write this as a zikaron, as a remembrance. So that's why we read the week before Purim, Parsha Zachor, the remembrance. And then next week, we're going to have the action of the Megillah, not just the reading of the Megillah, but everything it entails, the Suda, the meal, the giving of the gifts, right? Everything that involves Purim. So you have remembrance before the action, just like God said to Moses, write it in the book as a zikaron, a remembrance, and then place it into the ears of Joshua. I will surely wipe them out. Just keep that in mind. Now, just as a side point, you would never know this in the English, for sure not, but the Rokek points out, and I counted it. I read this today. Actually, I read it a few days ago, but in preparation for this year, I wanted to make sure this is 100% true. The Rokek points out that there are actually 166 verses in the Megillat Esther. Esther. Happens to be, there are two portions that we read. We read Deuteronomy 25, that was verses 17 through 19, this past Shabbos, and then on Purim itself, we're going to read in Exodus chapter 17, 8 through 16. Altogether, there's 166 words. So in the two parshiyot, the two paragraphs that deal with Amalek, there's exactly the same amount of words in one, and there's exactly the same amount of sentences. In other words, it's 166 in both. Now, you may not find that interesting. What we do is we find that absolutely exhilarating. In fact, the word Megillat Esther, the word Megillah, like from Gal, is like a roll. It's a scroll. Megillat Esther. You can translate it as the scroll of Esther, right? Everyone knows that, right? However, if I wanted to reveal something to you, the word Megillah, in mem causative, is the same word. It's a revelation. But what does Esther mean? It's her name. It's true. But it also means hidden. Hester Panim. God says, I will surely hide my face. Esther, Esther Panim. So Megillat Esther is not just simply the scroll of Esther. It's the revelation of that which is hidden. And when you're living in a framework of Hebrew, and I don't mean Hebrew, I mean Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language, it will help you understand what the instructions for living are all about. It will make them certainly much more meaningful, and it'll bring depth to everything that you do. And so this really, we're finished this evening about number 14, mikra. I hope that we got across how important mikra is in achieving wisdom, because without it, I don't think you stand a chance. You have to be literate. You have to be literate.
Well, Rabbi, thank you so much.
I started out very late, so I was reading a lot of English books, and I got a good handle. But when you're thirsty, you're hungry, right, for the Word of God, you have to go deeper. You have to go deeper into the original. I recently bought a set of Ramban, where it's an English translation along with the Hebrew. And whenever they reach the deeper Kabbalistic meaning, they tell you this is not for our audience. We have skipped this paragraph. I had several Rabbanim who wrote extremely Kabbalistic books, really deep stuff, and they asked if they could translate it into Hebrew to bigger rabbis, and the bigger rabbis said, no, this kind of stuff, you cannot translate it into English. So this is not a warning, this is a encouragement, right?
Yes. Rabbi, I know I'm a B'nai Noach, but I've been, slowly wanting to dive more into Hebrew. And I, actually had one Noahide friend in Seattle down there do a Hebrew class. My rabbi let us do 5 lessons, basic Hebrew. And, in this day and age, so often we get used to just looking up quick words, using software tools just to compare, but it's not the same as actually getting the depth of the whole of the matter. And you're making that so clear. And I'm one of these guys that when I decide to do it, I won't put it down until I got it. I can't. It's kind of like it just gets you a bug and you have to finish it. And to learn Hebrew, I can, I've got some beautiful sessions to speak, linguistic, modern day, but it's different than learning to read it. And the necessity to read it is so great. And Hashem willing, maybe I'll get the time and I'll jump all over it. And I just see it as the necessity for growth. And I don't want to tell people out there that are of the 70 nations it's a must. But in reality, how far do you want to cleave to Hashem, right?
It is a must. But again, everyone on their own level, everyone can only try as much as they can. Some people are limited, they're just naturally limited. The older you are, the more frustrated, or maybe the more time you have. You don't know. Everybody, only God, you know what I mean? Like if you're going to make a mistake, at least you made the mistake. Why follow other people who are making the mistakes? So I think it's best to try. So many people, my mother, she met Rav Noach Weinberg for the first time. It was an amazing story. And she says, your voice is so familiar. You're the one that made those tapes I'm listening to, aren't you? She says, it's because of you that I learned how to play the piano at my age.
Wow.
Okay, 35 years ago, but still, my mother's close to 80. In fact, she is 80.
Around 55.
Yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah, she decided.
It's a hard thing to do for some of us.
Because of his motivational ideas of it's never too late. It's never too late. And so, look, if it's piano's like a language as well, right? Music is a language. It's also abilities. I mean, nobody's going to hold it against you for trying. That's for sure. Okay.
And it brings its own joy. But Torah, as you've been very clear, it's definitely the way. As you the whole thing. I mean, right from the Bereshit. I remember the first time I heard that. I spent 32 years as an adult, worked in Christian schools and whatever. And the point being, you don't get that out of them. It just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist out there. And unless you're hearing it from a learned rabbi, you're not going to get those true golden nuggets that are real. And I encourage everybody, check every one of these messages out. Are we done for today, Rabbi? And I know that with Purim next week, we're off.
We're off. We're just delayed another week. Yeah.
All right. So we will not be doing part 16. No,
15.
15 next week. We'll not be doing 15. It'll be 2 weeks from today. So, folks, until then, we're going to sign off. And please share this. Give it some likes. Don't be afraid to even, post it out there yourself on social media. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you so much, Rabbi, for staying up late there in Jerusalem to share beyond the 7, the 48 ways to wisdom with the rest of the world. Till the next time, folks, have a wonderful, wonderful week.